Bonjour mes amis and welcome to Wargame European Escalation. I'm Hobby Gatling and today we'll be playing through the Able Archer campaign's third mission, 1914 again. We'll have to start by unlocking some units. We'll start with the British Challenger 1 tank, in my opinion the best tank in the entire game. We'll also choose the French Foreign Legion units with some armored personnel carriers. And we'll choose another helicopter unit to beef up our low helicopter reserves. This should form the base of our defense. I'm going to unlock a couple of cheap French anti-tank units, and that's it. Let's get to war.
West Germany surrendered, the Warsaw Pact troops stopped when they reached the French, Belgian, and Dutch borders. The Russian government claimed to have acted this way to put an end to the German threat, which was rearming like before 1939. Despite warnings from intelligence services about the reorganization and concentration of new forces positioned against the West, European diplomats have been caught up in endless peace discussions for months. The Western public is in need of peace. As for the Soviets, what they want is time. And now they are ready for the second phase of their offensive in the West. Objective, the French Atlantic coast. Warsaw Pact troops have crossed the French border. We must stop them against the Rhine before they can deploy more divisions. Those hills dominate the area. Controlling them is the key of this battle.
And here we go. In this mission we have some deployment time before we have to actually get into the fight. So I'm going to choose some good French troops and try to defend both India and Kilo Hills with them. The main objective is to accumulate 2,000 extra reserve points. Now we have only 800 and those are needed to get more troops on the field. I'll start with some Legionnaires in the AMX 10P APCs. Those are a good unit. They have lots of firepower and should be able to deal with enemy units at close range very well. I'm also calling in the French AMX 30B valorized tanks because we most certainly are going to need firepower in this one. Since the terrain is quite open, I'm also going to call in some missile teams and try to sprinkle them around the possible paths of enemy advance. Let's start the mission and go take the hills. We have 4 ATGM helicopters at the start of this mission. and we are off to a pretty terrible start. Lucky artillery rocket manages to hit and destroy 2 of my helicopters right there. The 2 survivors will be at the central location. I'll be using them as a mobile reserve, just like I did in the previous mission with the hogs. The only difference is this time the helicopters are armed with ATGMs, so I don't have to approach quite as close, and I can expect the helos to kill enemy tanks reliably. This particular traffic mess is reminiscent of multiplayer games. You usually end up with columns like this, and you'll have to spread them around in a hurry. We find the enemy BM-27 Uragan rocket launchers that are pushed quite far forward and take them quickly out. The supply trucks are empty, so I'm not going to risk any of my units trying to capture them. That's just useless. 2 empty supply trucks are not going to decide this fight either way. Our troops have started to reach the designated defense points India and Kilo. Usually in defensive missions I like to hide my units in the hedges and in the bushes, but here I'd rather use the hill itself as a defense. There's a concept called military crest of a hill. That's the point of a hill. If you are on top of a hill, military crest is the point where the people at the bottom of the hill can just barely see you. If you go slightly back beyond the military crest, you are hidden until the enemy starts to approach. I'm going to use that idea and force the enemy into close combat as often as possible. I'll just have to make sure I constantly have enough units on both hilltops to win the resulting close fights. With any luck, the enemy will try to push forward with mostly armor. In that case, I should be in a good position. I have quite a lot of infantry, and while the tanks I chose aren't the latest and greatest, I still have quite a lot of them, and the guns are powerful at close range. Both hills will also be defended with Roland surface-to-air missiles, just in case the enemy tries a heliborne assault on either one of them. There's one major flaw in this sort of an defensive tactic, and that's the clustering of my troops. Against a human opponent, this would be suicidal almost. They would just drop as much artillery as they could get on top of both hills. That's the first fight going victoriously for us. Center has some T-80s, but I have more than enough firepower to deal with them. I could try and expand my holdings here, but the secondary objective here, in addition to holding one of the hills for 15 minutes, is not losing any command vehicles. So I'll rather risk holding a slightly smaller area and gain points slightly slower than expand and have too many areas to hold comfortably. The engagement at Kilo is not going perfectly for us. We have taken quite heavy losses there, and while we manage to swat the T-72s, I'm still quite low on tanks and infantry there. The enemy tries to be clever and attack everywhere at once. The BMPs are approaching one of my hills while recon helicopters probe for weaknesses in my lines elsewhere. The Warsaw Pact is quite fond of using helicopters here, so making sure you have enough anti-air is pretty crucial. That's a good reason to use the French AMX-30 tanks. All French tanks have a 20mm autocannon that can also fire on airborne targets. So in essentially every French tank, and of course every AMX-10P, will act as an air defense unit. That's a couple of helicopters down right there. The ATGM helicopters will have to work overtime. I'm running them between the front line and the supply base. They only have a couple of missiles per helicopter, so they run out really quickly. In a way, that's not such a huge problem as you might think, because usually the 16 ATGMs those 4 helicopters carry are enough to blunt any given attack. The problems start mounting when the enemy attacks in 2 or 3 places at once. You'll have to decide whether you want to split up your reserve or try to stop one attack, then rearm and go at it again. These Soviet paras are a real pain in the ass. They got pretty close, and I don't really have enough of my own infantry nearby to stop them. So I'll have to throw in light vehicles and hope I manage to panic them enough so that they won't just roll over us all. Another unit of Motostrelki infantry manages to get behind India and take out the Roland's position there. The India hill is now pretty lightly defended. I'm calling in some British Challenger tanks, but at such close ranges they are not the optimal unit. However, they are durable enough that they can take 1 or 2 anti-tank weapon hits at close range. I'm hoping that will give me an edge. Both hills have enough supplies to repair the tank as long as it doesn't quite die. Still, that's a pretty terrible way of using big expensive tanks like that. If I had a total freedom to do as I pleased, I'd rather regroup all my challengers into one bunch and try to make a dedicated push somewhere to take off the pressure. The enemy is constantly hitting India Hill. Those T-62s might be a problem. The only weapon I really have available to me is that one Challenger that can deal with them. I also have the helicopter reserve, but it's currently tied up dealing with more Soviet armor approaching my backlines. This is a pretty good demonstration on why you always bring anti-air weapons with your tanks. One T-80 survived, but if it tries to approach my men, it'll get blasted to bits by my infantry. I'll rearm and send the reserve somewhere where it's needed more. The Gazelle cannon helicopters are armed with a light autocannon. As such, they are only really good at using against pinpoint targets such as command vehicles or maybe surface-to-air missile launchers that don't have enough time to deal with all the cannons. Against tanks, however, they are pretty useless, and the enemy seems really fond of sending a lot of tanks forward. I'm already out of French infantry, so I have to call the German Jäger units to assist in the defense of the hills. This far, this has been quite a multinational operation. We have both French legionnaires and German Jäger units defending the hills. French ATGM helicopters are running missions constantly, while the American Kiowa helicopter provides scouting for them. Even the British participate with the Challenger tanks that are currently holding the front line. That's one of my Challengers dead. As I can only call in 4 of them, the losses are quite a big deal, especially as I'd like to save some of them for the upcoming offensives in this campaign. We are sure to need a counterattack at some point, if not in this fight, then in a future one. That's more Soviet tanks. Still, my position here is pretty comfortable. I have enough men, I have a good solid line, I have reserves, and my points are slowly gathering up. The only thing I now need to do is to hold both the hills, and I'm sure to win. In one instant, all of my Gazelle cannons are shut down. That's the weakness of using non-ATGM armed helicopters. They have to get close in, and when they are close in, they'll die quickly to anything. Another assault repelled. We should be closing in on the first 1,000 points required. After that, I have a comfortable reserve of points. I can even spend some to beef up my defenses. And in fact, now is a good time when the enemy is also gathering forces. I'll have enough time to drive the troops closer. I need some more anti-air weapons near India. They currently don't really have any dedicated anti-air platforms. And that's the first secondary objective. Now there are two ways of handling this. We could either abandon both India and Kilo, pull back behind the river and defend the bridges. Or we could try to hold both hilltops, so we'll get more points quicker before the enemy manages to mass a crushing amount of troops against us. I'm going to try to hold both the hilltops. The position is looking good, and I don't have any real problems at the moment. That's some tempting targets, but I'd rather not risk any of my defensive units going after enemy CVs or Cubs here. It's enough to hold both the hilltops. Even the central position is looking pretty decent. I have a good amount of infantry there. I just need some supplies to give them more anti-tank weaponry. The MiGs are in the Hinds are in a bad position here. None of them will make it out alive. Trying to position the Roland anti-air vehicles so they get a shot at the Hinds but don't expose themselves to return fire is proving to be a bit of a problem. Takes a while, but we kill the second pair of helicopters. The position is in India is looking pretty solid, but I don't really have any recon to west of my position here. I'll rather reposition my CV on the right side of the objective area, just to be safe. If the enemy tries a rush, then it's possible they may overrun it before I notice and have a chance to drive it away. More tanks approaching Romeo. Once again, my helicopter reserve is engaged elsewhere, and while they are doing good work, they are out of ammunition and need to resupply before they are of any further use. That's the last two of my Gazelle pods. I'm hoping to get some mileage out of them in defense of Romeo. I don't really care about the objective area Romeo per se, but I can't allow the enemy to cut off our reinforcements this close to victory. We are now 400 points short of winning. This looks like a final push. If we can hold back this one, then we should be fine. Fortunately, the enemy tries to approach from the center. If they had gone at either one of my hills, then they might have had a little more time, especially India, which is being attacked from both sides. The safe places for a CV there are getting pretty short. The German infantry will have to work miracles here. That's four squads of infantry against God knows what the Soviets will throw through that building complex. Still, the situation is looking good. One T-64 makes it to the edge of India, but that's too little, too late. I'm not going to go after any enemy units at Quebec or north of my defensive position here at India and Kilo. I'll just wait till I get the last remaining points. And this is it.
The offensive has been halted, but intelligence was convinced that it was only a diversion. Their real goal was elsewhere.
And that's a victory for us, but at what cost? The kill lists for the old AMX-30s are quite handsome. The gazelles also did rather well, killing lots of expensive enemy armor. The bulk of the defense was clearly done by French troops. They paid a terrible price for it, and the list of casualties is long. C'est la guerre, mes amis, c'est la guerre. That concludes this mission, and we still have one more to go in this campaign. This is Hobgadling signing out. Peace.